To be firmly in means that we are very active members of the EU, and if necessary, we will have to have the courage to be critical. We shouldn't automatically consent to everything in the interest of big states. We have to continually fight for our national interest in the EU, and we should not be naive because all member countries in the club always fight for their national interests. We are the mid-sized European country, traditionally very industrialized and traditionally very export-oriented. To us, the most important achievement of the EU is the common market with its freedoms, free movement of people, goods, services, and investments. As far as GDP is concerned, the EU is the biggest market in the world, but four freedoms have not been fully achieved. Our priority is that instead of inventing newer and newer fields of integration, the EU should focus on achieving all these fundamental freedoms of the single market. Only after the single market operates at full capacity should we think about the new areas of integration. The potential of the single market is 1.6% of the global GDP of European Union. It means 260 billion euro.
Because it's interesting that the export to United States and Czech Republic, from the point of view of the total export as the revenues, the US is in the top 11. But from the point of view of the added value, from the point of view of the efficiency, from the point of view of margin, it's the US in the top 6. What does it mean? That's the future of the Czech Republic, to create the Czech Republic as an added value economy. That means we have to invest today, not tomorrow. Today, to the innovation, into the research, into the development.
Sorry, systemic rivalry. So what one has learned from President Biden's visit to Europe over the last week is that there is a genuine desire among the new administration in Washington and European leaders to emphasize the areas where they agree on China. And I thought it was interesting that this joint communique immediately attracted criticism from the Chinese authorities. They obviously prefer a divided transatlantic area than a united one.
During the last decade, and we're finally finished under the Trump administration. And I think what we see right now, and the conclusions of the summit with President Biden earlier this week in Brussels, showed that there is a sort of a restart, not only the political restart, but also economic restart. But again, I believe that there is still a lot of things that we need to discuss about, and a lot of work to do. There is a lot of symbolism in the exchanges between the EU and US representatives, but there has to be a concrete work
into the other next things and figure out how to work together. As I listen to the other panelists, one of the things that strikes me is what a big challenge it will be to learn how to work together again on a non-emergency basis and on an ongoing basis. We think a lot about this summit between the US and the EU this week, and where it made progress in resetting some of the difficult relationships of the prior US administration, where it made less progress than we might have hoped by not solving these long-standing trade disputes, but merely postponing them another few years. But I haven't heard enough talk, to my mind, about what a big deal it was just to get together, just to cross the borders and be in the room together. I know I had hoped to come to Prague for this conference. I know Tony did too, and we all benefit from being in the same spaces. And seeing each other in less intermediated ways. Without those networks, and rebuilding them will take a long time, even when we can travel again, it becomes harder to solve some of the cultural
bring also new opportunities. Generally speaking, we should look at the Transatlantic Partnership this particular way. With the change of administration in the US, more self-confident Europe, and the need to design a post-COVID world, we have a unique opportunity to open a new chapter of the Transatlantic Partnership. We could design a new transatlantic agenda for global cooperation based on our common values.
A lot has been already said by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic. Let me just share my perspective where we are now. I think that the summit, the EU summit on Tuesday, was a historic one. The first between the European Union and US since 2014. And it was also the first step to really test if we can talk of a renewed partnership. And I think it, in a way, confirmed that what we hoped for since the US election.
We could very well identify all those symptoms from the very inception of the first Obama administration. So, in what the transatlantic relationship is concerned, we need really two to tango. It is a two-way street. It is a shared responsibility, both from the United States and from Europe, especially from the European Union side. But we should not take for granted that because we have a change of administration in the United States, because we have now a president committed to multilateralism, that all the problems disappeared all of a sudden, and we are going to be back to the very
decision was taken, and why it's caused great consternation among many close allies who have always looked to the United States to have their back. So the Biden administration, as the previous speakers have said, is attempting to repair what it perceives as damage done in relationships with America's European allies. But there is a cost, often substantial, to pleasing one's allies when there is no clarity of outcomes. What this means is that will some governments...
Administration. I think everybody is breathing a little bit better. Specifically in the European environment. But I think there are some certain things that are staying with the US and have been around, also influencing foreign policy, which came out more violently during the Trump administration. But it's not much changed, I would say. Maybe the sound is nicer, but I think the what's behind it is still there, and that's what Donald Trump called America first. That's something the Europeans, I think, should keep in mind. The Biden administration looks like they're...
between boosting innovation in the digital transformation without leaving aside respect for fundamental rights. I personally count also on cooperation on the democratic front. I think it goes without saying that democracy and rule of law are the values underpinning our relations. They are common both to the EU and the US, and they are a precondition for everything else we want to achieve. Unfortunately, we see that democracy in the US and the EU is facing many challenges, such as the rise of far-right or far-left forces that preach authoritarian solutions.
The communique adopted by the heads of state and government, which has over 80 paragraphs. It's a chunky paper, but it's worth reading, and it illustrates the complexity of the issues that NATO as the transatlantic alliance is facing. But what I really want to highlight is the nature of the security environment we're living in and we're operating in, being individually as a part of NATO or as a part of the European Union. And the key challenge, what we're seeing, the key trend is the blurring line between civilian and military domains and so-called gray zone threats or gray zone issues, which lead us to strengthen the resilience of our societies, of our institutions, and also leads us to strengthen our collective response to those threats. And obviously we can talk about state actors such as Russia and China. We can also talk about non-state actors. We can also talk about private entities. All of these actors are operating in the gray zone and are in a way perpetrators of hybrid interference, if you will, or subject to that interference as well. And we're seeing a wide spectrum of issues happening, including disinformation, malicious cyber activities, risks associated with the proliferation of new technologies. And countering these threats is a priority for the Czech Republic, both on the national level, but also as a part of the NATO membership and the EU membership. And we need to ensure military and political cohesion, and that I think is one of the outcomes of the NATO summit that clearly demonstrated that
I don't know exactly how this administration will go about the China issue, but I think that this is one issue that we are pretty unified on. Another thing to think about with regards to U.S. foreign policy, and again, this gets back to the Iowa and the Washington, D.C. talk, but you know, U.S. voters, they don't vote on foreign policy, right? It's economic issues, it's internal security, and the Biden administration is going to be very involved in homeland issues too. So we're already, things with the border, that's going to engage a lot of their time and bandwidth, and so I would just ask, I hate to have the bar set too high for the U.S. relations. I know that they want to engage and they will try, but...
And going beyond words to deeds by approving a set of very concrete measures to strengthen NATO. And all of that is driven indeed, as the first speaker mentioned, by the awareness that the strategic environment that we are facing is one that demands greater transatlantic convergence and cooperation. And I think that is the case because we're witnessing, of course, the return or the growth of geopolitical competition. We now see a world in which...
As well, and less of the confusion and discrepancies with a confrontational newscast or press conference that is dissected for days and days and days after. And I think the question is, what do we do with that, with this new normalcy?
Identified enemy with clearly identified military power, procedures, and all the preparation for defense, collective defense, was rather straightforward. Today, as we heard from other interventions, the situation is much more complicated. We don't only have one strong opponent, a military opponent, Russia. We have other important opponents. We have China, we have Iran, we have North Korea, we have a number of failed states who, equipped with the right technology, can pose a serious threat to our interests and even vital threats to their neighbors. We have a number of new threats and challenges that we usually describe as hybrid. They come from a number of different actors, from Russia, China.